get the agenda, I'm sorry, large enough so I can, having a little trouble here. It is not responding. You might have to lead on the agenda, or I'll look over on my phone. I'm using a computer and my phone, but to try to.
Okay, that's fine. I thought that I would start off with giving us kind of, rules of engagement for today's meeting.
Sure.
We have some folks joining online where I am displaying the agenda on my computer. And then we have other folks who are joining by conference call. And the agenda is posted up on our website. I have started the recording, and we will be taking minutes today. The clerk's office is on the line. And at the beginning, we'll take roll to see who's on the line. The clerk's office has requested that everyone identify yourself before you say anything, so that he'll be able to, record the minutes correctly. Identify yourself every single time you say something. We're not scheduled to take any votes today. This is just an informational workshop, and I will talk more at the end of the meeting about how the MPO will probably be conducting business for the next couple of weeks. But for today, this is just for information and discussion. We will ask the members for any comments or objections on each of the agenda items, so that that information can be relayed to the full board when the board meets. We do also ask that when you are not speaking, that you put yourself on mute, because there are going to be a lot of folks on the call, and so just to minimize the amount of background noise so that we can hear each other. There is a public comment portion of the agenda, and we will ask for folks to speak if they care to during the public comment portion of the agenda. You can speak by asking the chair, Commissioner Kemp, to acknowledge you. Also, if you are online, you can type in the chat window and I will monitor that. Some folks joining online don't have microphones, and so you can use the chat window to communicate, and I will read your comments into the record. The agenda that we distributed also says please mute yourself after joining the conference call to minimize background noise, and participating remotely is encouraged for public health. It does say public viewing of the meeting will continue to be available in the Plan Hillsborough room on the 18th floor County Center while the building is open. The building is no longer open to the public, so that option is not available to us right now. And I think that is it.
Okay.
I could call the roll. So let me go on the board roster first, and then the speaker, and then we'll see who else is on the call. So our board roster is Commissioner Miller on the call. Okay, Commissioner Kemp.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson or Mr. Klug.
Yes.
Councilman Citro.
Yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Hagan.
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Hardin. Mr. Lapano or his new alternate, Ms. Evans. Mayor Lott.
Yes.
Councilman Maniscalco. Mr. Marino. Commissioner Overman.
Yes.
we have a new representative from City of Temple Terrace, Vice Mayor Ross. Commissioner Smith. Ms. Stewart.
I'm here.
Thanks. Councilman Vieira. Mr. Wagner or Mr. Fry?
Mr. Fry is here. Mr. Wagner is coming to his phone right now.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. Okay, and then our speakers today, Mr. Gwynn, Ms. Sauls.
I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Of my staff, Johnny Wong,
Morning.
Sarah McKinley,
Morning.
and some of our other staff, Mr. Lyons,
I'm here.
Mr. Benson, Mr. Cochran,
Here.
and Mr. Pizarro.
I'm here.
Great. And so could I ask who is on the line whose name I did not call?
Good morning. This is David Gwynn with FDOT. I have Richard Moss, Ed McKinney, and Justin Hall here with me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Who else?
Linda Crescentini with Harley.
Okay. Linda Crescentini. Thank you.
Cindy Raskin, Director of Commuter Services for T-BARTA.
Great. Who else?
Good morning, Gina Evans from the Tampa International Airport.
Morning, Gina. Anyone else on the call?
Melissa Zornita with the Planning Commission.
Thanks.
Stephen Benson with the City of Tampa.
Morning, Stephen. And who else?
Good morning, Roger
Chris Vella from Ybor City.
Okay. So I heard Roger Roscoe, and then who else spoke there?
This is Chris Vella from Ybor City.
Morning, Chris.
John
Amanda Brown with Commissioner Smith's office.
Okay. And then I also
Hello.
John Patrick with Hillsborough County. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And who else?
Joe Wagner just joined. Can't get on the computer. It says it's full.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you were able to join us on the conference call. And I will look into the capacity issues on the website. I apologize about that. Didn't realize that would happen.
Yes.
I'm almost glad you had that problem.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Did we miss anyone who's on the call and who didn't say their name yet?
Yes, Mariella Smith, and I also ran into the issue of the conference was full when I tried to join by computer.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyone else on the call? Okay, I'm reading a couple of names from the chat window. Kelly Bradley with FDOT Program Management. Anthea Thomas, who is the person with the Broward MPO. She says hello. Brittany Ellers with the Emerald Coast Council, also listening in. We got Cindy Raskin with T-BARTA. Chris Villa asks if he can share his screen. I'm not positive about that. We can give that a try. And then Renee Callow with DOT Work Program Office in District 7. So did I miss anybody else? Okay. Okay, well, let's get started. Commissioner Kemp, the first two items on our agenda, call to order and introductions, and then public comments.
Right. And so do we have public comment at this time? Any public comment? This is,
Yes,
can you
Commissioner, this is
identify
Chris
yourself?
Bella.
Yep, go ahead, Chris.
Yes, so this is Chris from Ybor. Zip code is 33605. I was wondering if it's possible I can share my screen really briefly.
We can.
I don't know.
We can give that a try, Chris. Oh, there are a lot of folks who aren't online because we hit capacity on this apparently.
Okay.
So I wonder if you could email me what you'd like to share, and then I will send it out to everybody who's on the call today.
Okay, I can do that. I'll just go over some numbers that I have. So the reason why I'm talking today, and I'll be brief, is because I still have a lot of concerns about some projects that are being recommended on the tip. And so my big concerns are the 14th and 15th Street exit, and also the cycle track that's going to be occurring in Ybor City. What I have done is I looked at traffic data provided by FDOT, and what I've noticed is that a lot of the traffic that is coming to 21st Street into Ybor from I-4, there has been a 3% reduction. So we're not actually seeing an increase at all coming from 275 into Ybor City. So this kind of goes against the whole idea that we would need to meet the demands for having this 14th and 15th Street exit. I've also have crash maps showing that the majority of crashes are actually occurring on the north side of I-4 in front of 21st and 22nd. All those crashes have nothing to do with Ybor. It's actually all the traffic coming from the north to the south. So that's another issue that I wanted to kind of make note. We are from 275 to I-4. The traffic has been pretty steadily. Back in 2014, we were looking at 26,000 cars. And in 2018, we're looking at 30,000 cars. So this is the I-4 eastbound ramp from 275. So my point, just throwing out all these figures right now, is that we're only seeing, in some cases, a negative percentage of traffic. This is average daily traffic demand. And we're also seeing only single digits, basically increases of that. And I think that what we really need to do is look at if 14th and 15th Street is really, truly the way to go. And I can tell you it isn't. Our neighborhood associations against it. And then, of course, we have a lot of health impacts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to forward this information. It's a big packet to the whole board. I urge you all to read it, take into consideration. What I don't want to see is that having this data get disputed, because that's constantly what I see whenever I try to put some information out there. It just gets disputed and beaten down. And I think this is data that I've drawn from the county. This is data I draw from the state. So this is what we're looking at today. And again, I don't think we need to move forward with these exits or with these type of modifications with the downtown interchange. So with that said, I'll leave you guys back to your business. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We can all look at that. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment at this time? Okay. With that, then we'll move on to status reports, and we have our first earmarks in the state budget with Secretary David Gwynn. Oh, and Planning Commission Legislative Affairs, Diane Sauls.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to go over with you a little bit about the earmark process and what we've got currently in the proposed budget for earmarks. Just for your information, the way that the FDOT looks at the earmarks are that any earmark that comes in and is approved and makes it through the governor's signature, the district the FDOT district from which that earmark resides is responsible for covering the cost of that earmark. And so every year we try to get out and talk to all the legislators as well as others who may be talking to their legislators about earmarks to look for opportunities to try to accommodate the projects or to fund the projects some way outside of an earmark, outside of an appropriation. And the main reason we try to do that is that once an appropriation makes it into the proposed budget, whether it gets vetoed or whether it gets approved, that takes money out of our budget. This year, we have about $20 million in earmarks that are going to go to the governor's office for his signature or for his veto, which means that we are going to have to find $20 million within our work program to be able to cover those projects. Essentially what it does is it hijacks the MPO priority process and it puts projects that maybe weren't prioritized by the MPO at the front of the line in the first year of the work program. Last year, we had a similar situation where we had a lot of earmarks, and what we were able to do, for a couple of reasons, we got a little bit lucky. One, we had some projects that came in under bid that we had a little money left over that we could use to cover those appropriations. But the other thing was is we basically got rid of almost all of our contingencies on all of our projects. And those contingencies are typically in there to cover things like maybe a bid comes in higher than we expected, maybe the prices on certain things change throughout the year and we get a higher price. It may be that we have added work on a project that we didn't foresee at the beginning of the project that we need to give more money to do some more work. And so we basically raided all the cupboards and didn't have it left. So what will happen now is that we're going to be expected to work with our central office to find what projects are we going to use to cover those earmarks. What projects are we going to delay or cancel? It's a little bit more complicated than that because we cannot use certain types of funds to cover these earmarks. We can't use federal money to cover the state earmarks. And we can't use funds like the strategic intermodal system if it's for a project that's not on the SIS. We have maybe something in multimodal that we have to use another multimodal fund, a transit project with a transit project, a seaport project with a seaport or airport. And so we're going to be going through the process, and we'll certainly coordinate with the MPOs to try to find something that's okay for all of us. But I do think we're going to have to this year look at either delaying or postponing some projects. One of the other things that I'm a little bit worried about, we all know that right now the world is just kind of strange and a lot of things are going to show up in the numbers in the next few months, and one of them is probably going to be the amount of gas tax revenue that we collect. As you know, a big part of our funding is based on gas tax revenue. The Revenue Estimating Conference that usually meets every 6 months, I believe is now going to meet quarterly, and maybe even more than that once they see the revenue numbers. But what they're going to do is they're going to tell us how much money we actually have, and I'm expecting that at some point we're going to have to do a reconciliation with what the money that we had programmed in the work program versus what we actually will receive. And that will mean that we may have to look at additional projects to delay. So the earmarks just kind of put additional pressure on it. So it's kind of really not much we can do at this point this year unless there's another special session for the budget and they take these out, and it's not in the budget, final budget, but whether these projects get approved or not by the governor, it's going to hit our district by about $20 million. So with that, Beth, I think that's all I was planning to say. And I don't know if anyone had any questions or if anyone else wanted to add anything more about the earmarks.
Does anyone, this is Pat Kemp, does anyone have any questions?
And Chairwoman Kemp, this is Louis Veer. I got on a couple minutes ago, just FYI.
Okay, great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions of Secretary Gwynn? Secretary, I've got a question. The 20 million, can you say what those projects are? Is it like 20 projects, or is it 3 projects, or what is it?
So it's a combination. Do you know how many specific projects they are? Kelly, are you on the line that you could speak to that? That's not good. I think it's about 18 projects. There are some rather large ones. Most of the larger ones, quite honestly, are up in Pasco, Hernando counties. But unfortunately, the dollars that go to those counties are so small compared to what they are in the bigger counties that it's hard to cover them with just the projects in those counties. But we can certainly get the list of all of the earmarks out. There are a few in Hillsborough County. There are a few that go beyond one county, like T-Barta had a $1.5 million earmark. There's some that I probably feel should be more considered economic development types of grants, but they were put under DOT because they somehow touched a road. It seems like if you have to take a road to get to a project, somehow they turn it back to DOT because of our budget size. There's several in Pinellas County that are large drainage projects along roadways. Probably the biggest one was up in Lacucci in Pasco County was a project to help to draw in a large employer and to build the roads to help to get that going. So it's a real runs the gamut of types of projects.
I would like it if you could maybe submit the list or give us the backup on that for all the boards. So when you talk about that too, so you're I assume from what you said that you may be trying at least to, if a certain region, a certain county asks for a project, that you would try first off to use that against projects that they already have going in their county. So at least I think if people do this, or if jurisdictions do this, that there should at least be some impact for them like that. Otherwise, it's just a win.
Yeah, no, we can actually, if you want, we could email that over to Beth now, and she could email it out to the board. The ones that are in Hillsborough County right now, there was about $1 million for some work out at the Veterans Park off of 301. There was some improvements, I think pedestrian and bicycle improvements along Lois Avenue. The other ones we have in there is Pepper Hills had about a $2.3 million for improvements on US 301. And Anderson Snow Road up in, I guess that's in Hernando County, that was $5.7 million. But we will try to take the money from the county in which the earmark is if we can. Unfortunately, in some of the smaller counties, the type of money we need to use to cover the earmark is more than that county gets for the whole year. So it's a balancing act, but we certainly do look first.
And I would agree with you too. I've noticed before that some things seem to have creep into economic development, which is of course important, but it just seems as though that is something that should be, dealt with in jurisdictions, economic development dollars, not placed and put on this to burden what our priorities are. The other thing that I talked about last year, and I'll talk about it again, is I know last year T-Barta did go by earmark, and there was I expressed concerns about that at the time. So now we have that situation again. I know last year HART and PSTA each lost $1 million that they had in set-asides. I, as you know, I'm very concerned about our operations facility, especially considering the new environment we find ourselves in. I would hate to think of the loss. I know there was some talk that it could be made up in future years, but it could also be, a problem again in future years. So I'm just wondering if the T-Barta money, I know you said transit to transit. So does that mean that if T-Bar to get their earmark, that again, both transit agencies could be impacted?
It depends. What we first try to do, and last year we weren't able to because there just wasn't anything, we try to look at statewide money that may not be being used. There may be some money that was allocated for something that statewide didn't get used, and we try to pull from that first. And if that doesn't work, we typically try to work with, in our district, of course, is PSTA and HART, to see if there's a project that maybe doesn't need the money in the first year, and we'll try to program it later when they might need it. I think last year what happened was there was some money that they couldn't really use right away, so we're not going to take it away forever. We're just kind of moving it out into where they probably were going to use it anyway, because some of these are rolled forward every year until they use it. So I'm going to try to not hit the transit agencies if we can avoid it.
And I guess finally, it's very concerning that about the gas tax issue and just available funding. And it sounds like you're giving us a heads up on that we could be facing some tough times as far as that goes.
Right, and last year we actually did have to move a few projects around. We moved some projects from like a June letting to a July letting. We put it in a new fiscal year because they made some adjustments on the outer years of the economy. There's a good number of headwinds on the funding right now. You've got in the fourth and fifth year, they're starting to show that the electric vehicles are going to decrease the gas tax because we'll see a larger amount of electric vehicles. Now in probably the first year, we're going to see whatever drops we get from the loss of, people driving to work, people from tourism in here driving cars, renting cars. So we're going to have some headwinds, but we're going to work to do our best. I can also tell you, though, that we've been directed by the governor to try to advance the projects that we have next year as much as possible, so that we can help to stimulate the economy once things get back to normal. So I think some projects we may have let in the spring of 21 or late 21, we may be trying to pull in and let them out, say in July, August, September of this year. So we're working with that. And I think they're also looking at the potential for additional bonding that we may not have completely used before to help plug some of the holes. So they're working hard to try to lessen the impact as much as possible.
Okay, are there any other questions? I heard someone, I think. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I can hear someone, I think, talking. Beth, can you hear?
I can't hear what they're saying either. It might just be someone in the background.
Okay.
I think this is Lewis. I think it's background.
Okay, sorry. Okay, great. So I guess we'll move on. I don't have the agenda right in front of me, Beth. So what, or in the screen I see.
Sure.
Is there...
And so if it's all right with you, I'd like to invite the Planning Commission's Legislative Affairs representative to say a couple words about how we can work with our legislative delegation in the coming year.
Of course.
Beth,
on the
this
issue
is
of
Joe
the
Wagner. You
earmarks.
might ask those who aren't speaking to put their phones on mute so we don't get that background noise.
That's a good idea. I'm sure everybody heard that. Your phone on mute if you're not speaking, please. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. This is Diane Falls. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can
Hello?
hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, board members. Thank you, Secretary Gwynn, Beth, Melissa, for inviting me to this conference, video conference. I would like to just add a few words. I think obviously these are extraordinary times, and I'm very optimistic that we will learn quite a bit and move forward. In moving forward, I see that there are some opportunities that we can explore. I feel like there are a lot of poor choices being made by our legislators on which projects to sponsor appropriations for. And I feel like we probably could ramp up our efforts in the area of outreach with our legislative delegation members and staff, city and county officials. And we can keep it simple and suggest some very good choices for them to make. We could do a stronger effort in promoting the TIP priorities. And I think that we can help to advance a spirit of collaboration, cooperation, and I feel like we need to repeat. It's something that we probably can't do enough of. Our delegation is a group of fabulous, civic-minded people who really sincerely want to do the right thing. And what I've seen these past couple of sessions with this delegation we have currently, there is a team spirit and they work together very, very well. And I feel that they do want to make the right choices and do the right thing. It's just a matter of putting the right information in front of them, explaining it to them so they understand, and like I said, possibly repeating. They've got a very full plates, as you as elected officials do as well, and oftentimes you just can't message enough to them. And I would be happy to take any questions at all. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any questions?
And if I could add to that just very briefly, again, this is Beth Alden. Diane, would it be your suggestion that if there are going to be earmark requests, that they be incorporated into the TIP priority list that comes out of the MPO so that we're all kind of singing off the same song sheet when we're communicating with our legislators?
Absolutely, Beth, thank you. I feel like if we simplify choices, put together like menu options for them, doing a little bit of homework first, figuring out, what TIP priority is in whose legislative district. I feel like this will simplify the decision process for each legislator, and making it as simple as possible, helping them find a priority that they can stand behind and make an appropriation request. And that way we're all singing off the same song sheet and moving forward in the same direction and not at cross purposes with one another. I sincerely feel like we can act as a team together. It's just a matter of presenting choices in a very simple fashion and helping legislators understand the benefits, the opportunities that we have in front of us.
Okay, thank you.
This is Commissioner Overman. I have a question, please.
Sure, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. As it pertains to what Diane was just talking about, previously it was either at the TMA level or it was at the MPO level. There was discussion about having a informational workshop with our delegation so that they understood what's on our tip, why it's on our tip, and the impact of, earmarking prior to getting into session or prior to getting into committee. Is that on our agenda as far as making sure we get that done? Because to both Diane's point and David Gwynn's point, they're going to put things on the list their constituents are asking for that may be on the list, but not necessarily in this year's tip. And since our funding schedule and building schedule for whatever resources we put on our short-term improvement plan may not be obvious to our legislators. They have a lot on their plate. They are dealing with a lot of different issues. And, you know, when we saw 4 or 5 bills that all had to do with school safety and crosswalks and in various different forms last year, I think it's going to be critically important that we communicate efficiently with our delegations so that they can become our advocate rather than detract in earmarking. And I'll wait for an answer. Thank you.
Because
I could not, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Diane.
Okay.
Can you
I could not agree. I'm sorry, this is Diane Sauls. And I think this question was for me. And all I want to say is yes, yes, and yes. As many different forums, workshops, one-on-ones, carefully prepared menu lists. We really have a job of communication in front of us here. And I feel like, you know, timing is an issue. Where projects fall in the TIP is one of those pieces of information that should be helpful when we work together as a team with these legislators. And I feel like it's no easy task at all, and it's going to take some time. But the more communication and the simplest of communication, the better. I hope I answered your question.
Is there anybody, I suppose there definitely is, but working with the governor's office? Because, I mean, if the, you know, earmarks were vetoed, it would stop happening. But it seems very difficult to stop. Okay. That being said, I don't know if there's any further discussion. Okay. So I guess we will move on now to the 2020 surtax projects overview. Johnny Wong.
Okay. And I will pull up those slides for the folks who are online. I've also emailed out the slides in advance to all of the board members, but anyone is welcome to send me an email, and I will send them the slides as well.
All right, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Johnny Wong, MPO staff, and I'm the IOC staff support liaison. I'm here this morning to provide you with a brief snapshot of some of the projects contained in each of the agency's 2020 project plans. We first made this presentation back in December, and at that time we were very hopeful about what the new year was going to hold for us and what we could accomplish with that sales tax. Fast forward to today, and we're just about through with 3 months of the year. We're still in a holding pattern, and with all the legal challenges that we're so familiar with, I would say that as of today, at best, it's unclear if any of these projects are going to be delivered with the sales tax funds in 2020. But I think what we can take away from each of these project plans is that each agency has a very specific vision for how they can optimize the impact of this new revenue source on transportation performance. So we're going to take a look at some of the highlights of each agency's plan now. Next slide, please, Beth.
Yep.
So the Independent Oversight Committee had a meeting in November to review all the project plans and make a determination as to whether or not the plans comply with applicable laws. At that meeting, HART presented first and shared its sales tax vision, and the name of the plan is Transit Formation. HART is the largest agency, and it's going to be receiving the largest share of the surtax revenue. In 2020, it's going to be spending, or in 2020, it was projected to be spending its funds collected in both 2019, which were being held over until a resolution of the sales tax legal challenge, and 2020. So in this plan, they identified about $250 million of spending And as the only transit agency, their spending is prescribed by the governing law. So HART has to spend 35% of its funds on fixed guideway projects, 45% on enhancing bus service, and 20% remaining can go to any transit-related project that's not in violation of any applicable law. So to begin with, the enhancing bus service portion, HART identified more than $30 million to be spent on route restoration. They wanted to restore routes that were cut as a result of Mission Max. HART was going to use this money to improve weekend frequency in the university area, on Columbus, MLK, and 30th Street, and then add a route in South County to serve some of the transit population down there. And then during the week, Monday through Friday, frequency is going to be improved on University, Kennedy, MLK, and also 22nd Street. The remainder of the service enhancement funds were going to be spent on improvements to the rider experience. So they were going to invest this money on fare box replacements, refining the Flamingo Fare app, investing in a new maintenance facility to serve that growing fleet, and make improvements to stops and stations. And then the largest investment of that enhancing bus service portion is going to be used to purchase 66 new buses, 10 of which were electric, 56 CNG. And that would have been a huge step forward for HART because they have a goal of maintaining an average fleet age of 7 years. And so these new buses would dramatically reduce the average fleet age, which is now about 13 years. So that would have been a huge step forward. And as a result, also reducing the number of breakdowns suffered each day. This slide is showing the $5 million that's going to be spent on assessing corridors for fixed guideway projects, including an evaluation of the CSX tracks. The vast majority of the money that falls into this funding category of fixed guideway is going to be held over to pay for any rail projects that move forward as a result of the studies that are being conducted. And then the next slide is showing what the agency intends on doing with the 20% of funds left over. Most of these funds are going to be used for planning purposes, filling service gaps, and upgrading some of the technology, especially in the maintenance facility and in the back office. I also want to note that a portion of that money is going to be spent on administration. They're intending to raise the wages of drivers, mechanics, and some other service techs to make them more competitive with other transit agencies and allow them to retain some of that top-tier talent. All right, moving on. This slide just kind of shows a breakdown by the numbers of how that money is going to be spent. So this is a summary of the funding allocations in HART's plan. Next slide. At that November meeting, the City of Tampa presented its plan second. The City of Tampa's plan was to spend $49 million on projects through the end of calendar year 2020. As one of the two jurisdictions that are defined as a large agency by population, the City of Tampa is required to spend at least 20% of its sales tax funds on maintenance and vulnerability projects, 26% on congestion projects, 27% on safety, and 12% on network improvements, meaning bike ped. This chart provided by the city shows how the project types in the city's plan relate back to the project categories that were described in the surtax governing law, in the AFT surtax ballot language. The city was hoping to use the funds across multiple projects, so hoping to fund projects that yield benefits in multiple project categories. By doing this, that allows them to pull funds from multiple buckets and invest in larger projects that have many benefits, not only limited to maintenance and vulnerability, but also congestion, safety, and bike ped. And you can see that just about every project category put forward by the city has some safety benefit. So we expect that that will make a huge improvement toward achieving the Vision Zero target. Next slide. The city also wanted to emphasize equity in geographical distribution of these project funds. They intend to accomplish that by spreading the projects over the entirety of the city over the 30-year period. And this map just kind of shows you which projects are going to be pursued in year one of the surtax plan, and we would expect that trend to continue over the duration of the fund. Next slide. This slide shows by the numbers that the investments are going to tally basically a lot of improvements throughout the city. More than 28 road miles are going to receive complete street treatments, including 22nd Street from Bush to Fowler, 109th Avenue from Nebraska to 30th Street, Twigs from Ashley Drive to Nebraska, and there are many more of these. I'm only selecting a few to talk about this morning. This fund will also pay for 50 miles of new sidewalks and bike paths across the entire city. It's going to allow them to build out the Green Artery Perimeter Trail and the Green Spine Cycle Track. 50 intersections will be improved in year one, including 15 traffic signal upgrades in Ybor City alone. Both the Cass Street and Bro Rain bridges will be rehabilitated, and 5 neighborhoods will have their streets resurfaced, including North Bon Air, North Tampa, Terrace Park, University Square, and West Shore Palms. Next slide, please. Hillsborough County is the other large agency defined by population. Hillsborough County is the municipality that's going to be receiving the largest share of the surtax. And like Tampa, the county is required to spend its funds according to a formula prescribed in the ordinance. So for calendar year 2020, Hillsborough County was planning to spend about $210 million on projects through the end of year one. The next slide shows how these funds were going to be broken down according to project type. They created this chart to show how they align with the goals identified in our LRTP and our State of the System report. As far as allocating the funds, the county used a slightly different approach from what the city did. Whereas the city of Tampa provided cost estimates for individual projects, the county adopted a different perspective, and they chose to direct funds towards specific programs, which will provide staff a little bit more flexibility in selecting projects to satisfy requirements of the funding allocations. Next slide. And this chart provided by the county shows a general breakdown of how those surtax funds are going to be allocated across the project categories. The programs receiving the largest shares of the funds are the Smart Traffic Network Program. Some of the projects that fall under that program category would include expanding and upgrading the signal communication infrastructure, video monitoring technology, signal priority for emergency vehicles and buses, advanced traffic controllers. These are the kinds of technologies that could dramatically increase reliability in some of our major arterials. Those arterials being the major source of our congestion problems that we identified in the State of the System report. The other highest funded program category is Corridor Complete Streets Improvements Program. $35 million is allocated to that program, and it identifies 17 corridors for enhancements like bike, ped, and transit facilities, turn lanes, access improvements, and safety measures. We expect that this will generate a positive impact for Vision Zero because 8 of our top 20 Vision Zero corridors are located on county roads. And lastly, the Safe Routes to School program allocates about $16 million, and the projects in that program will improve access and safety for about 15 schools in the county. Next slide, please. The next 2 municipalities are Temple Terrace and Plant City. According to the governing law, these are defined as small agencies based on population, and so neither Temple Terrace nor Plant City are required to spend a certain percentage of their funds on specific categories. They're free to spend all, none, or just some of the money on any project category identified in the charter. For 2020, most of Temple Terrace's surtax funds are going to be allocated to just a few projects, and I've shown them on the following slides. The 3 big ticket items for Temple Terrace are all maintenance projects, but they anticipate that these resurfacing projects will also yield some safety benefits. The first project is a resurfacing, which is located around the Temple Terrace Golf Club. Next slide, please. The second large investment is a resurfacing project on West and East River Drive. And then lastly, another resurfacing project located between Whiteway Drive and Druid Hills Road. Finally, Plant City. Plant City is going to be using its 2020 funds, or was slated for using its 2020 funds for resurfacing pavements in several of its neighborhoods. In total, Plant City intended on resurfacing about 10 miles of streets. They were going to use this money to do mill and resurfacing jobs. Next slide, please. In the project plan provided to us by the city, they offered an entire map of where these resurfacing projects are located. It was a little bit too large to include on one PowerPoint slide, so I've had to crop them and show them on 3 separate slides. I know it's a little bit difficult to get your bearings by breaking it up this way, but a full-size map is available in the Plant City project plan, and that's available on the ILC website. You can scroll through, please, Beth. And then the final slide. So that about wraps it up. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about the IOC. Our role in the legal challenge is limited. We don't really have a role to play there. So if you have any questions about the IOC's business or status, I'd be happy to answer them. If you have specific questions about projects in the plans, I might redirect those to any agency staff that's on the phone this morning.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? Any questions? Okay, hearing none, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
I will go to the transportation tip 2022 through 2026. Sarah McKinley.
Good morning. Yes, this morning I'm going to discuss the Transportation Improvement Program, the update to our priority list. This is for fiscal years 2022 through 2026. Next slide. All right. So each year we get together with the jurisdictions and partner agencies and review what our priority projects are for the new fifth year. We discussed existing plus any additional ones. This year, we did that earlier. Normally we do that in February. We did that mostly in January this year. And then requested that we have any new priority letters received by February 28th. With those new priorities, applications are also due. So FDOT had required those due by March 20th. And then we'll be working on finalizing the revisions to the priority list following this presentation. Next slide. As far as the prioritization process, we do tie this back to our long-range transportation plan. And with that, we have the different programs that we categorize each of the projects into. And then we also have criteria that we rank the projects within those programs. So the first one is state of good repair and resiliency. So this is looking at the transit system as it is and maintaining that, as well as our bridges resurfacing, and then resiliency for the future. We also have now our Vision Zero program. This looks at total crashes, severe crashes, bike ped crashes, as well as crashes per mile when ranking projects. We then go into our smart cities. This looks at the planning time index as well as travel time reliability. So looking at how we can improve congestion within the network with smaller, bigger bang for your buck kind of projects, looking at technology and other schools. real choices when driving. This looks at the density served, so population and employment access to jobs. And then our final program is our major projects. And this is where we look at our forecasted congestion as well as delay reduction as well. Next slide. So I'm going to go through each of the jurisdictions. We did not receive excuse me, as many additional new projects this year. But for what we have on our list as what has become funded versus what is existing priorities as well. So for Hillsborough County, as we can recall from the most recent updated tip, the Big Bend at I-75 interchange, that was a big win, getting that funded. That is being locally funded with a reimbursement from the state in fiscal year 24. Gibsonton at I-75, that you'll see as sort of a recurring project through this presentation is sort of the next big top priority, addressing that interchange. In the previous year, the county submitted 2 intersection improvements, one at US 301 and Review Drive, and then the other at US 41, 50th Street at Palm River Road. I believe the US 301 at Riverview Drive is now being done as part of another project. So that is moving forward through local funds. We still have the Upper Tampa Bay Trail that is still looking at alignment determinations. The Tampa Bay Bypass Canal Trail, that has a PD&E underway. And we're still looking to prioritize design funds to fund the next phases for that project. And then the South Coast Greenway. Some phases have been funded around 19th, and we're looking to move forward with additional phases. Next slide. For the city of Tampa, we still have the Green Spine Cycle Track. At each phase, we've been able to fund a phase of that. And we have 2 left. The West River Greenway, the Stewart Connector, that was funded in the highlights of this year. We also have the Modern Streetcar Extension that continues to be a major project for our priorities. We did receive 2 new projects from the city of Tampa. This includes traffic signals at both Stewart 60 and 26th Street. There's some development going in there. This is across from the IKEA, so a lot going on there, as well as Spruce Boy Scout at Manhattan. Next slide. And this is just a map that shows you what the projects are and where they're located. Next slide. Plant C, they have had pretty much the same consistent priorities for the last about 3 or 4 years. This includes West Sam Island Road from Alexander to Paul Buckman Highway, little widening to 4 lanes. We have intersection improvements at Alexander and 39, as well as Alexander and Johnson, and then Parkwood and Cornett. We've been working with the city on these projects and FDOT to sort of phase the construction and moving these forward as well. We also have US 92 from Park Road to County Line Road, widening to 4 lanes. This is also a major project for us. And then based on a quarter alignment study that the MPO did, we have Rice Road and East Second Allen Road. These are 2 extensions towards the Polk County line. And then Tomlin and Marshall Middle Schools looking at sidewalk improvements and how to move these forward with the Safe Routes to School application. Next slide. And this just shows a map of where those projects are located for reference. Next slide. With Temple Terrace, we've again been working closely with them. The Davis Road extension has been a top priority for Temple Terrace. this is looking to move into sort of PD&E and design phase. The county had previously committed $3 million with an additional $3.8 million needed for construction. There's also the multi-use trail along Morris Bridge Road, and then a shared use path to connect Temple Terrace to USF. We have a complete street along Bullard Parkway, as well as a light vehicle footbridge over the Hillsborough River Whiteway Drive. A lot of these, we've been working closely with Temple Terrace and the county because a lot of them are on county facilities. So we're looking to continue to move that. And then the next slide, again, is a map of these projects. So you can see for your reference there. All right. And then working with Hart on their priorities. They have quite a few that we've been working on. Bus replacements every year. We have been requesting $4 million in funding for new buses. We also had the CAD AVL system that we were able to fund in previous years. The maintenance facility expansion and also the need for a new facility, as well as the North-South Metro Rapid construction. They had a request for fiber optic routing between the jurisdictions, and then also upgrade to their scheduling software. Bus capital improvements, they'd requested $5 million, and we've been able to prioritize $1 million annually. So this, like the bus replacements, will become sort of a annual fund for them to utilize, as well as looking at the need for a new satellite maintenance facility as well. Next slide. And then the CNG compressor, this is actually moving forward as an amendment right now to fund in this fiscal year. Some of their new projects include automated vehicles, facility, and infrastructure. They're also prioritizing the need for electric buses and infrastructure to support that. So moving electric vehicles into the fleet as well. And then modernizing the streetcars, as well as the CSX study, looking at furthering that along and continuing that, as well as real estate acquisitions. Next slide. We also have TBARTA has renewed their request for support for the regional van pool. This is a request of $800,000 annually. Next slide. We also then, again, work very closely with FDOT and with their request as well, US 92 improvements. This has, again, become a major project for us, looking at widening the most eastern portion to the Polk County line, as well as the most western portion. And then the sort of middle piece looking at intersection improvements at McIntosh Road, Forbes Road, and Mango Road. Gibson I-75, again, another major project. And then the integrated corridor management system, looking at sort of how technology can help the roadways. So Hillsborough Avenue, Spruce and Boy Scout, and then Nebraska. US 41 to Causeway, looking at intersection and personal improvement. And then looking at Street for a community, as well as.
Can you hold on a second? Someone needs to mute their. Okay, it sounds like that happened. Thank you. Keep going.
Great, thank you. State Road 54 from 301 to Turkey Creek, looking at safety improvements, and then State Road 60 in the eastern portion of the county, looking at intersection improvements along there. And then the next slide is a map depicting where those projects are located. In green, I showed which is sort of the western part through the city of Tampa. Those are those integrated quarter management projects, and then the rest of the projects as well. Great, next slide. We also work with the port. They have many priorities as well. These are both on and off port properties. So there's a handful in the channel side area, sort of moving their master plan along, working with pedestrian nodes, as well as realignment of some of the roadways, some complete streets, and new roads within the network. There's also a project at Hooker's Point, as well as a couple of projects at Port Red Wing, looking at some rail spurs and access to the cargo yard. Next slide. The off-port projects, again, Channel Side Drive. This is looking at a complete street to, again, support the master plan that they have there, as well as Causeway Boulevard, operational improvements, Madison Avenue, widening from 2 to 4 lanes. The grade separation at the CSX rail crossing. This has been a major project that was presented to the board a few months back that is moving forward with funding and has been advanced. We also have US 41 from Madison to Denver, widening to 6 lanes. Again, US 41 Pendola Point, operational improvements. And then also the prioritization of I-4 from 50th to Polk County line, the managed lanes along there. Next slide. All right. So as far as our major projects and our priority list this year, we've sort of pulled those out into a separate, much more simplified list. And these are sort of the top priorities for the MPO as far as funding of major projects. This includes I-275 from MLK to north of Pierce, as well as the downtown interchange, the safety and operational improvements. Again, Gibsonton at I-75, rebuilding that interchange, and the modernization and extension of the Tampa streetcar. We also have the Hart Maintenance Facility expansion, and then US 92. That is also a top priority. We've been working very closely with FDOT, the county, and Plant City to work on moving these forward. Again, the widening of the most western and eastern portions of US 92, and then also the intersection improvements at McIntosh and Forbes Road, as well as Mango Road. Next slide. So with this, I guess we are workshopping these new priorities that we've received at this point with no objection, I guess, from the committee. We will incorporate these into our list and then move these forward for adoption when we adopt the new TIP at the June 10th public hearing. So with that, I will take any questions.
Okay, is there anyone with questions? That was a long list. Any questions?
Madam Chair, if I could add the slides that Sarah just showed, and I'm sorry, this is Beth Alden. The slides are in the agenda packet that's posted on our website.
I just, not so much a question, well, maybe not to be done right at this point. If we could go back to slide 4. That's it. So what I'd like to try to see as we move forward is some pricing, some idea of what the costs are for something like the Gibsonton I-75 rebuild. There was many slides where I saw that there were, some had some estimates attached, some did not. I also wondered about the Big Bend I-75. So we have the design build for 58 million. And so is FDOT forwarding that? Is the county and with a reimbursement in 2024 for 20 million? Can anyone speak to that?
Yes, the county is renting the design build of that for the 58 million with the reimbursement from the state in 2020. The Gibsonton interchange at I-75, I believe the last I heard, it's about a $35 million estimate. I didn't put that in there just because those seem to be changing a little bit. So, but that's sort of the last rough estimate that I heard for that project as well.
And so several, and the Palm River, we don't see costs for. It would be good to see some for the trails also, although I expect them to come in much lower. But as you go through, you can see there's, I have slide 7 marked, that also, I think it'd be very good for us to have more information about these projects specifically, but also, especially just basically an idea of the cost. So we're looking, some of them did get the dollars put in there, and some of them did not. Like we see US 92 doesn't have dollars attached, and then other ones have PD&E, but not projected costs. And I think that would be helpful as we move forward to start having that be a practice for me to move it forward. And also, I guess this is something with HART, but slide 12. If we can go to slide 12. And so I guess these are put in order of priority, and I guess this is with HART that we have this, but the automated vehicle facilities infrastructure, I don't think that's been discussed at a HART board meeting where I've been, and it doesn't seem to me to be something with our other needs that we would be putting even in at this time. I don't know what that is unless it's, for single vehicle occupancy cards, which aren't even out there at this time. So I think that would merit more discussion, but again, I'll bring that forward at HART. And then slide 14, again, we don't have our costs, I think. Attached to many of those projects, which, that gives you one sense of prioritizing. I'd like to learn more about the projects, but, that's, I think, a basic in terms of understanding how we move forward and what those costs are. Is there anybody else who has any comments or questions?
Yes, Mariella Smith.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. So our county commission has not yet seen or passed this, the TIP priority list, correct? And that is required. So that will have to happen when in the timeline of things?
Well, we did vote. We had, we had a majority vote in support of that. So I'm not sure. Beth, do you, I don't know who can answer
Commissioner
that.
Kemp, this is John Lyons.
Oh, yes.
We have not brought a list of any new TIP projects to the board at this point in time. There are probably over a dozen projects that are listed in the approved TIP that are listed as candidates for new funding. And that's where pretty much each one of the ones that you see on slide number 7 came from. We can bring, since we weren't asking for any new projects to be added, we hadn't prepared anything to bring to the board.
I see.
There's other projects on there, such as the Baum widening from 301 over to Clement Pride. It's on a new candidate for funding list as well. And there's obviously the need is greater than what the resources are at this point.
Right. So that's a new I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
I'm sorry. I didn't quite understand. Does that mean that we have nothing new that the board the BOCC didn't previously approve moving forward on this year's TIP?
We did not add any new projects. The ones that are on the list. So I believe Beth could probably explain this better, but there are projects that are within the current program that have some amount of funding. There's also a list of projects that have been submitted previously that are in a category called candidates for new funding. And so each year, this is kind of a rolling addition of projects where a jurisdiction could choose to maybe eliminate projects because they found another funding source, or to add new projects because they become a priority, or rely upon the existing candidate list to pull from. Because I think the key thing is that the funding that we're talking about is either rearranging existing priorities within the TIP program, or trying to compete for the new funding in the 5th year, which I don't think that was mentioned, and I don't know what that amount is that everybody is competing for.
Sure. This is Beth Alden. If I could add to that, and John's right. We do this every year, updating the list and contacting the local agencies to find out what's new. We haven't received a new communication from Hillsborough County this year. So the projects that are on the Hillsborough County slide right now are projects for which we received a request in previous years.
Thank you.
The typical way that projects are funded through the MPO process, there's a set aside of federal funds, federal grant dollars that the MPO board sets the priorities for. And those dollars amount to around $20 million a year-ish, more or less. Those funds are they're programmed. Every year we add one more year to the 5-year work program. And the year that we add is the last year in the work program. So most of the projects that are competing for those federal grants, we're competing right now for fiscal 2026.
Mm-hmm.
There are other funding opportunities. In a lot of cases, those dollars are also allocated for the next 5 years, so we still might be looking farther out. The advantage of using some of the state funds where projects are eligible, or using local funds, generally the advantage of that is that there's less paperwork involved. There's always a lot of red tape with grants.
Thank you. Chairwoman Kemp, if I may just ask a couple more questions. The HART allocations also struck me that the HART board has not approved that list yet. So how does that process work? How did we get projects here that hadn't been passed by the HART board, notably $5 million for AV funding? Yes. AV facilities and infrastructure. How do those appear here before they've gone to the HART board, and when do they go to the HART board? What is the timing there?
So Beth Alden again. Of course, the MPO board back in I think it was in December voted to send a letter to each of the local jurisdictions and agencies asking that any project requests like this be sent from the agency's governing board.
Mm-hmm.
It was a request. It wasn't a mandate. And so it is still up to each local government or agency to determine what their approval process is. We have gotten a letter from the HART interim CEO asking for these projects, including some new green highlighted projects that are showing up in green highlights. Those are new requests this year, based on the letter that we just received from the HART CEO.
Okay, thank you. So can you forward me that letter,
Sure.
Beth? Yes. And just finally, a couple of quick questions about some of the projects. The $800,000 for T-BARTA van pool. I'm not on the T-BARTA board, so yeah. Can you just briefly explain what that is?
Well, I think Brian Pizarro from T-BARTA is on the call, so I wanted to invite him to speak to that.
This is Brian Pizarro. I believe Cindy is also on the phone as well. Could you repeat the question for me, please?
Yes, thank you. I just would like a brief description of that $800,000 regional van pool project.
Sure, I can certainly give a description of the van pool, unless Cindy, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
How about if I'll let you take it since you're the Director of Community Services?
Sure. Cindy Raskin, Director of Commuter Services for T-BARTA. So in the past, the Hillsborough MPO has funded for T-BARTA expansion of the regional van pool program. This $800,000 per year would represent the monthly subsidy that we offer to van pools who are traveling into or out of Hillsborough County. We subsidize $400 per van per month. So it's about $4,800 per year per van. And so this $800,000 would represent funding for about 166 vans per year. Right now, the majority of vans that are in the T-BARTA van pool program are Hillsborough vans. So this addition to your tip would allow us to continue to expand that. The van pools are a great way to reduce traffic congestion in a much more immediate way than some of the longer term projects, transit projects and road projects.
Thank you. So this would be expanding the current van pool capacity to new vans, or just extending the support, the current level of support?
It has the potential, sorry, Cindy again from T-BARTA, it has the potential to do both. We do have funding from FDOT that helps support the subsidies for vans, and we also have federal 5307 funding that helps support this as well. So, of course, as we look into the future, 5 years from now, when this funding would become available, you know, we would need to evaluate what the specific opportunities are for expansion at the time. But the idea is to support and expand.
Mm-hmm. And is there local funding, local Hillsborough County funding that is funding vans coming and going from other counties?
T-BARTA gets some local funding for administrative activities and some other activities, but the van pool program is supported by the state FDOT Commuter Assistance Program funding, federal FTA funds, and the MPO SDP funds.
This is Beth Alden again. Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I understood that the funds that came through the Hillsborough MPO were being used for van pools that have at least one endpoint in Hillsborough County. So either folks are living in Hillsborough County or they're working in Hillsborough County, or both, but at least
that's correct.
Accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. And if I may, Madam Chair, one last question about one project.
Sure. And just to clarify on TBARDA, as I'm on the board, there is another expenditure by Hillsborough County, and correct me if I'm wrong, Beth, that does go directly to TBARDA, and that is used for lobbying for the earmarks that are ultimately taking money from our transit agencies because they can't use their own money for lobbying. So they use and I forget what that allocation is, but I just wanted to clarify because you might think this is, I assume, for support in the regional van pool, which I think is an excellent program and really good. But our general dollars from Hillsborough County that go to them, not in this program, is specifically designated in the TBARDA budget for lobbying, and that lobbying is specifically to get the earmarks that are denying our transit agencies dollars. But go on with your next question.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Just one last question about the project on State Road 60, the intersection improvements. And let me see, I think that was slide, was it slide 14? No.
I think it's slide 14 at the bottom of the slide, State Route 60 from Dover Road to Polk County Line intersection improvements. Is that the one you were thinking of?
Yes, ma'am. So is that in lieu of widening? Was there some talk of widening that section, or this is what's in the tip here is the intersection improvements?
So I do, and this is again, I think this is a new concept. You're right. This is the segment that we were talking about last fall as a possible widening project. With some concerns that it was outside the urban services area and that the lanes weren't necessarily needed based on the traffic forecast. And so I think the district has come back with a new concept to focus on the intersections and just dealing with those intersection bottlenecks specifically.
Like turn lanes, like signalization, like what would that entail, intersection improvements?
This is Justin Hall with FDOT. This is not in lieu of widening of 60. That obviously is still part of the cost feasible plan for CIS in the outer years in Tier 4. But the big thing here is this is all of the above what you said: signal improvements, turn lane improvements, anything to improve the operations of the intersections along 60, because almost all of them are failing. So we have to address something in the interim until we can get to the widening. So this is innovative intersections. We've done this on US 19 and Pinella, some other areas, and it's just an opportunity to improve traffic flow without having to increase capacity.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there anyone else with questions?
Yes, this is Rick Lott. So, first of all, hello everyone. It's kind of interesting having a virtual meeting like this with slides and so forth. It's hard for me because I'm definitely ADD, and so keeping up with everything is definitely a challenge for me. I don't even want to have that issue or not, but I'm looking at this list, and these are a lot of great projects and so forth. So, I guess I know at some point in time we have to come up with that prioritization list. So I guess the question is how do we go from, this list of projects from everyone, which I know this is what we asked you to accomplish, Beth, and great work and everything. And so what's the process to get from these individual lists from everyone to having that overall list? How do we do that?
Sure. This is Beth Alden again, and that's a great question. And you're right. That's the next step. And I put up on the web page slide 3, which talks about the prioritization process. So what we're looking at is how do each of these projects improve the performance outcomes for our transportation system. And so, a number of these projects have a variety of different kinds of benefits. Some of them have safety benefits. Some of them have state of good repair benefits. And so we're looking at the benefits for all of those projects as we fit them into categories. And fitting them into categories is how they then appear on that priority list that you're probably used to seeing at the public hearing in June. The major projects, which is the projects that are, typically more than $10 million, those are projects for which we need to really come together and advocate. And so my proposal this year is that we pull out those projects and highlight them with a one-pager that we can share with our legislative delegation, with our colleagues around the Tampa Bay region, to help communicate better those important projects for which we're going to ask for any available funds. So US 92 might be one of those. The I-75 Gibsonton interchange, another one that you saw on this list. And so for the purpose of communicating and advocating for these major projects, we've created a draft version of what that one pager could look like. And that is in the last page of your agenda package. So I'm going to
So if Beth, if I can ask here, does that allow, I guess this question is probably for FDOT here. Does this list allow FDOT the ability to go get the funding they need to make these projects a reality, or does that hinder them? Could I hear from FDOT on that?
This Ed McKinney with DOT. For the major projects specifically, so how we fund projects is we start with priority number 1. Whatever that priority is, that's where we start. We're talking, well, first thing we fund is we fund the next phase of projects that are already funded. For example, if we have a design phase, we might fund a portion of a right-of-way phase or fully fund right-of-way or fund a construction phase. So that's the first thing we do. So once we have whatever the remaining funds are, then we start going down the priority list. And we start at number 1, whatever that is. And we fund the first phase of that project. It could be a design phase, it could be a project development phase, whatever that phase is. So as we work down that list, and the way that Hillsborough County currently does, or Hillsborough MPO currently does their priorities, the major projects, what we struggle with is funding that first phase. We want to get design projects funded. We want it. So if we're going to advocate for projects, there's got to be some skin in the game from the local MPO, and that's the design. That's portions of the right of way, and it's very hard for us to get to those first phases, those design phases, those project development phases, if they're low on the priority list. If they're number 30, if they're number 33, we're never going to get to those. There's just not enough SU allocation. So I hope I've explained that well enough to kind of give you some information to discuss.
If I can ask another question. So sure. It sounds to me like, Beth, that we're creating 2 priority lists. One is minor projects and one are major projects. Am I hearing that accurately?
That's fair, yes.
Okay. So if there's a list, Ed, that says that for major projects, here's our top 10 major projects, okay? And here they are ranked 1, 2 through 10. If you had that list, does that give you what you need?
No, the funnel process does not allow us to skip from priority to priority. And I'm assuming if you gave me a separate major priority projects list, it has to be one list. So we're going to, and it sounds simple, and it probably is that it's that simple. We're going to start at number one, whatever that number one is. If it's a major project, we will fund the first phase or the next phase of that project. If it's another type of project, ATMS, those, and so what we try to do, and I want to explain this as well. What we try to do is we try to use a mixture of funds. So we look at all kinds of, we look at SIGP funds, we look at TRIP funds, and these are different types, TA funds. We look at different funding types, and we try to appropriate the best type of fund for that project that allows us to keep moving down that list. So it's not a simple process that we say we have $20 million and we just spend that down. We have $20 million in SU allocation to Hillsborough, but then there's transportation alternative funds, there's SIGP funds, there's TRIP funds, there's district allocated funds. And what we try to do is we try to move, but we're constantly moving down the list, and it's one list. So if a project is number 33, it's very difficult for us to get down to that project with any type of those funds because it's not a high enough priority.
So then what I'm hearing then, by having a separate list for major projects doesn't give you the ability to get those lists funded then?
It makes it very challenging. We have to look at other types of funding. If it's, for example, State Road 60, recognizing that that's a major strategic corridor, we're going to look for state funds where we can, but it's not ever going to be enough to do anything other than operational type improvements because some of these projects do require a heavy lift. They do require some skin in the game, and as Beth pointed out, they're going to require a level of advocacy. But to get to that point, you got to get at least design funded. You got to start funding right-of-way phases. You got to show that this is the high priority. It's got to be a high priority project. It's got to be a high number on a single list for you to advocate for those projects.
Could I add something? This is Beth. So Ed,
yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Ed, I'm a little bit confused because my understanding is that other districts work with other MPOs using multiple lists. And we have respected the district's wishes to have just a single list of all projects in a rank order. We respected the district's wishes to have that for the last 7 years. But that wasn't always true in the past. And a lot of other MPOs do use separate lists for separate funding categories. And that's not a crazy idea because different funding categories have different strings attached. You just threw out a bunch of acronyms, SIGP, for example, the County Incentive Grant Program, TRIP, the Transportation Regional Incentive Program. All of those have very specific eligibility requirements. They have specific match requirements. So there's a lot of things besides just putting this on a list that's going to be required in order to get a project into the funded work program. And we are digging into the weeds with your staff on every single one of these projects to try to do our best job to get funding allocated to these projects. And there's a lot of legwork that is involved with this. Part of the challenge with these major projects, and I'm talking, US 92 project is not a cheap project. That was in the $100 million range. That is way out of scale with the kind of funding that you're talking about in the SU program. I mentioned all the federal dollars that the MPO sets priorities for, that you just mentioned as SU, that, again, that's in the like 20 million a year range. And we're talking about, how to advance some incremental safety improvements around our high crash county with those SU dollars. There's no way you're going to be able to build the US 92 project with SU funding. The only way the US 92 project moves forward is if it's a state project and has access to state funds. And that's what I'm saying we need to come together and advocate for. It's the only way that this happens.
So let me, I mean, those are great points, Beth, but I'm not saying that the heavy lift for US 92 would be done by the county, but it's, what I'm saying is, and the secretary spoke to stimulus projects. Let's use that as an example, which happens probably more frequently than it's happened quite a bit in my career. So when the central office or the governor's office says that we want a stimulus program, we want to start funding some projects, the projects that they go after typically are the shovel ready or projects that are in an advanced phase. What I'm saying is that for us to be ready for those, whether it's stimulus, whether it's a district that happens to have some funding that they can't spend, with a federal highway saying, here's an allocation to the state of Florida that wasn't used in Minnesota, can you guys spend it? The projects that we're typically going after are projects that have either a level of design that we can go to design build, or a level of design where we've identified significant right-of-way costs. That's what I'm talking about. We would never say that US 92, and I agree with you, Hillsborough County would never be able to build that project using its SU allocation. But for us to say that's a priority, it needs to be a priority. It can't be number 30 something on the list, and us advocate for that. It makes it very it puts it in a very challenging situation, and also, so these are the things that we try to work through.
Okay, there's one more thing that I'd like to add if I could, and that is there are strategic reasons for having smaller dollar projects up at the top of the priority list. And that is that when you have small amounts of funding that become available, you can move forward some of those small projects. And I have to say that, we met with your staff within the last month and heard from them that they were able to advance some projects in Hillsborough County with some very small amounts of money that became available, in part because we had small dollar projects at the top of our priority list, and Pasco MPO did not, and Pinellas MPO did not. Pasco MPO had up at the top of this priority list, what was it, the 54, 56 project? And there was no way that you could fund a phase of that project with the small amount of money that came in. So they skipped Pasco, and they skipped Pinellas for the same reason. But we had some projects on the list that could be advanced. On the other hand, if we have some smaller dollar projects at the top of the list and we work our way through those, and you get to the major projects that you would use, for example, strategic intermodal system funding for, you get to those major projects where they are on the list, the I-275 projects. We got the I-275 West Shore Interchange project funded at $1.4 billion, even though it was in the 30s on the Hillsborough MPO priority list. And we did that because of communication and advocacy, because of having a clear message like the one that I am putting in front of you on this screen so that we can advocate for it. I really don't see that having like an I-275 project, number 30 on the list, has stopped you from getting that funding. I-75 Big Bend Road Interchange, same thing. We had it in the 30s on the list, but we had a clear message about it. And what I'm saying is we need to move US 92 into that category.
I'll just say that, this is, the question was asked, and I attempted to answer the question as to how we fund projects and some of the challenges we face with funding those projects. Ultimately, the Hillsborough MPO that makes this decision. We do not make the decision on what those priorities are.
Okay. Is there any further?
Madam Chairman, this is Rick Lott again.
Yes.
So to get back to Beth, to how we, I guess that's and for some reason I can't get the screen up right now. For some reason, I don't know why, but so the process we're going to use in our upcoming meetings to get to this list, I'm assuming that you're taking this list and you're accumulating the priority list. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So are we still going to continue? Are we going to create two lists or one list, or what is that process?
It is ultimately up to the board, but there is a draft one-pager at the end of your agenda package. And our next step would be to bring that to the MPO's advisory committees in the month of May, and then bring that to the board at the TIP hearing.
Beth, what page is that on?
That's page 66.
Okay, fair enough.
Could you put that on the screen, Beth? Thank you.
It is. Yep.
For some reason, I can't get to the screen right now, so all I have is what you emailed me, so I'll look at it later then.
Okay.
Can you send that packet out to us that has everything on there?
Yeah, the agenda package is posted up on our website. There's a calendar of public meetings, and if you click on today's meeting, there's a link to the agenda package.
Okay, thank you.
That agenda package does have the presentation slides in it for folks who are listening, and it has this draft one-pager of major projects on page 66.
Okay, thank you very much, Beth.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a good discussion. Is there any other comments now at this point? Questions? Okay. And Beth, I'd just like to say I'd also want that letter from Hart to see that. I don't know whether it should, if everybody wants it, but I definitely, like Commissioner Smith, would like to have a copy of that. So seeing no other, I guess we will move now. The meeting is getting quite long, but to the roundtable discussion.
So this is Beth again. This is just an opportunity for each of the agency representatives to say a couple of words about their project requests. And we had John Lyons listed first, and then Stephen Benson with City of Tampa.
Hi, this is John Lyons. So on our list, we'll most likely be bringing that back to our board just to validate the priorities of those existing projects. And we'll try to do that as soon as possible. You know, as with many of those projects, and I think the discussion was very good, that, you know, everyone's going to require additional funding sources to complete those projects with a limited amount of money. Some of those initial phases are the only things that we can start on. And so the, you know, any additional funding sources such as surtax are going to be critical for delivering and completing those projects.
Thank you. Steve Benson, City of Tampa.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes, thank you. The two projects that we have added to our request letter this year, in addition to supporting some of the previously identified projects and some of the safety projects on the state highway system within the city limits, those new projects are the traffic signal installations on State Road 60, Adamo Drive at 26th Street, and Boy Scout Boulevard at Manhattan Avenue. Both of those projects are safety projects and are currently under study by the Department of Transportation. And the latter priority was a recommendation that came from the West Shore Alliance Transportation Action Plan that I believe went before the MPO for review. In addition, there are 2 projects that we will be submitting for SIGP, the County Incentive Grant Program, that we will be providing to the MPO as well. They were not in our letter, but we will be sending over that documentation shortly. Those are an Interbay Boulevard project from West Shore to Bay Shore, and then also Twig Street in downtown Tampa from Ashley Drive to Nebraska Avenue. Both of those projects are safety and operational improvement projects. And that concludes the new projects that we'll be submitting this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Cochran with the Hillsborough Area Regional Transit HART Authority. Chris? I guess he's not on the call. The Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority, Bob Frey.
No, I'm sorry, I'm here. I had it on mute.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I had a phone call from Carolyn. What was the question? I apologize. Our CEO.
It's just we're doing a roundtable discussion with agency representatives, and everyone's just giving a couple-minute summary. Is that fair, Beth? If you want to do that of what we're looking at.
Yeah. So having heard the feedback on the discussion on these projects, I think it's reasonable. We need certainly to bring this back to the HART board. In the past, we followed the procedure that we've brought it to the MPO upon request, and we will certainly bring this back to you for review and be able to adjust these before final approval. With that, HART is we continue to move forward on our other projects, and I'm certainly waiting anxiously to hear what's going on with our additional surtax funding. So if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority, Bob Frey.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Bob Fry, I'm planning director at the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority. The projects we're looking at right now that we've been talking to the MPO on have been pretty much the Silman Greenway projects, and that has been to enhance the Greenway and actually working with the SPP area on connectivity to the Meridian Trail as well.
Great. And T-Bar to the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority, Brian Passaro.
Yes, this is Brian Passaro. I can't think of really anything to add that Cindy didn't already cover. So Cindy, unless there's something you want to add, I think we'll just pass.
Okay, and Beth, I don't know, other agency representatives as available. Did you want to take over here? And I'm not sure who that would be.
Sure, this is Beth. I don't know if we have any other agency representatives on the line who wanted to speak about their project requests. Does District 7 want to say anything about the things that District 7 requested this year? Okay, well, sounds like no.
Okay, hearing, and I'm assuming that there's no other comments or questions at this time. Is that true? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to old and new business. And the first thing, which I'm sure is on everyone's mind, the MPO operations during a health emergency. So, Beth.
Thank you. And I just wanted to give everyone a quick update on where we are. We are moving ahead with all of the work of the MPO from telecommuting locations. So the county center building has been closed to the public for now. And our staff has been telecommuting. We are in production on the transportation improvement program, which is due in July and does require a public hearing. So I'm crossing my fingers about that. We're also in production on our MPO Unified Planning Work Program and Budget, which is our budget for our planning activities. That is due to the Department of Transportation in mid-May. And we continue to hold committee meetings online in the same way that this meeting has been held. We are moving forward with expanding our online data sharing portal. Right now, it just has travel time reliability on it, but we are expanding that to include crash data, and that's something that we're sharing with all of the jurisdictions. The Plant City Transit Master Plan is still underway. There's some service concepts being developed for that, and we and my team is available to all of you in real time. Our office phone numbers forward to our cell phones. We're available by email, and we are happy to set up conference calls, video conferencing, share documents with any of you during regular business hours. So the most recent development is that there was an executive order from the governor on Friday that allows local governments to be able to take action to vote on business at teleconference meetings. And so if we're able to take advantage of that flexibility, then we'll be able to hold our MPO board meeting, which is currently scheduled for the 14th of April. We could hold that online. And we have a couple of, these are fairly minor action items. We have some TIP amendments for HART, which are timely. We're coming up to the end of the state fiscal year. And so if HART is going to be able to encumber those funds before the end of the fiscal year, it would be very helpful for the MPO board to go ahead and be able to take action on those. And so my proposal to you all, and I'll be talking about it with our chair as well, my proposal to you all is that we go ahead and hold a regular MPO board meeting via teleconference and be able to vote on those TIP amendments. Of course, I'm going to be looking into this capacity issue that we've had this morning with our web portal GoToMeeting. I'm informed that we should have been able to have 150 people log into this GoToMeeting site, and so I'm startled to find that we seem to be capped at 26. But I'm going to get to the bottom of that and make sure that everybody has access to any meetings that we would hold online. So are there any questions or concerns about the approach at this point?
Any questions? Any other concerns? Anything more to share? Okay. And any other old or new business at this point? Okay, I just want to thank you, Beth. I think you did an incredible job putting this together and organizing it and keeping us on track. So good work, not easy, and thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. I'm glad everybody was able to join, and everyone needs to stay healthy and practice social distancing and do everything. We need to pull out of this and be stronger than before.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So long. We're adjourned.
Thank you.